Okay, guys. I know Pushkar as a very well established and a very well respected VC voice in Indian ecosystem. And I'm very pleased to introduce him to 2080 Ventures and our audience at Beyond Stack today. The goal of this webinar is purely to pique his mind and get try to understand his playbook for introducing financial fundamentals for new and aspiring founders, first-time founders. What are the gaps that he's seeing in Indian ecosystem right now or US ecosystem right now? Pushkar is pretty much in sync. He's an active investor. He looks at startup with a very different lens. So I thought it would be great to host him today. Uh, Welcome, Pushkar. Your first thoughts. Please do add in if I missed out anything. Yeah.
Thanks, Abhishek. Many thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's always a pleasure talking to you. And like you said, I come with a background in finance. I'm not a techie, even though I work with startups now, I invest in startups. I studied finance all my life, did my MBA in finance, did a MSc in economics. So, yeah, I look at startups from a slightly different lens. And like you said, so see, of course, finance is still not the core skill you need to build a startup, but it's one of the important, I would say, supporting skills that all founders need to know, at least to a certain level. And that's why I talk to a lot of founders in India, also in US, Southeast Asia, and I realize most of them don't come with a background in finance, and sometimes they miss on certain things. And that's what we have been trying to teach them through different courses, webinars, workshops. So it's been a lot of fun.
I actually wanted to start my thing out, and I have always been fascinated between a constant gap between how VCs look at a company and how founders themselves look at a company. A lot of us today, including me, we have been ex-founders, we have been operators. Well, I've never been a VC, but I'm very glad that I've been able to work with 2080 and beyond, like the past year, understand VC ecosystem much more closely right now. But I wanted to ask you, where do you think there is a gap between how a VC looks at a company and a founder looks at a company? Where do you think the gap comes in, especially for first-time founders?
To be honest, there is not a massive gap. It's not that something you can't gulf or something you can't surpass. It's just that 99, or I would say 100% of founders are builders. They want to build products. This is why they are doing startups, because they have seen a massive gap in the market. Could be anything. Could be deep tech, could be manufacturing, D2C, brand, SaaS, anything. They come with a technical background, and then they realize that, hey, this is something we have to fill. They are builders at heart. Now, of course, to build any product, you need to be great at building. Whatever you're building, could be a software, could be hardware, could be a consumer brand. But to run a company, you also need a certain level of financial knowledge, because companies are not exactly financial entities, but finance is a core part of running any business, be it working capital management, be it cash flow, understanding how to raise capital, how do you issue shares, like how does dilution happen, how long does it take to build a product, how do you monetize it, what should be your customer acquisition cost. And a lot of first time founders, because they don't come from a background in finance, are not exactly aware about these things. And I don't blame them, because they have never done that in their lives. It's not there. Like they're not building a bank. They're building a product company. But unfortunately, how the reality is that you also need certain amount of financial knowledge to be able to build a company, especially once you have grown to, I would say, not to a really large extent, but once you start making revenue, you also need some corporate finance, some financial management.
Pushkar, give me a little thesis on what can a first-time founder expect when they are attending this course that we are trying to build together. What would be key takeaways for any first-time founder to attend such a course?
So I have spoken to, I would say, hundreds of founders in past 2, 3 years. And I have realized that they're great guys and they understand what they're building. But just to give you an example, something as simple as primary and secondary shares, that when you raise capital, you have to issue new shares to the investor, and that causes dilution. That's one of the simplest concepts of corporate finance. And that is something I have personally seen a lot of founders that are not even aware of. They don't understand that. And it's not something that's a deal breaker. You learn that on the fly. When you start raising capital, you realize that. But it helps a lot that if you're aware of that, hey, to run a company, because finance is a core aspect of any business. To run a business, we have to understand, we have to master these 10, 15 techniques, 10, 15 topics. And that is what we are bringing to this course. For example, how are different entities, for example, an LLC in US versus a S Corp or a private limited company in India versus an LLP? What are different structures? If you want to raise capital, what is the most efficient structure?
Yeah.
What are cash flows? Why should you track your cash flow? How are they different from an accounting metric? What are different KPIs and MIS you should track, even if you're not raising capital? So, this entire course is not structured around that you have to raise capital. It just makes you a good finance manager from a starter perspective.
I would leave the floor open if Timur, you would like to ask something and anything on your mind that we can bring more for the audience.
Yeah, Pushkar, I wanted to ask, right? Because there's a lot of times, one thing we learn in the VC world, in the early stages, most of the founders make the same mistake when it comes to capital. And these same mistakes are repeated constantly, right? So, what are the top things you've seen?
There are a lot of technical mistakes founders make. For example, they don't know how to do the right filing or how to issue shares, but let's not talk about those. Let's talk about something that can kill you. Not all the founder, but I would say 90% of the founders I know don't track their burn efficiently. Because let's say I run a small startup, my monthly revenue could be $100,000, just to give you an example, or $50,000. But that is a revenue I'm booking. I'm not getting that money on day zero. Some of my B2B clients might be paying me in 90 days. Unfortunately, when I calculate my burn, a lot of founders just use the revenue for cash flow, which is incorrect. People don't understand that, hey, there's one accounting revenue and then there's a cash flow revenue. As a founder, you have to track your cash flow because all of a sudden you realize that, hey, I booked so much revenue, my expenses are like so much, and suddenly there's no money in the bank.
Pushkar, just building on to what Timur asked you and you answered so beautifully, I wanted to check with you what is the worst financial advice you think is currently going on in the ecosystem right now?
So, of course, there are dozens, and it's also a fascinating question, but there is something I would say which is an evergreen bad advice that people have been getting for years across countries, across geographies, across startups is that try to raise as much money as possible on as high a valuation as you can. And what it does is it not forces founders, but it encourages founders to leave good financing deals, good equity deals at reasonable valuation because there is someone who is telling them that, hey, don't raise money at $5 million, raise money at 50 million or $25 million. Now, sometimes, of course, founders can get lucky. And if I'm building a great product, I have an amazing background, I might get a $25 million pre-seed valuation, which is fine. But that is not the industry benchmark. And unfortunately, in news stories, they only write about everything that is very sensational. And most founders read those news and say, hey, this XYZ guy raised money at $50 million. Why can't I? And they go out in the market with such unreasonable expectations, especially the first time founders, that sometimes they leave out great investors at very reasonable valuations on the table. Founder, what you should be looking at is, hey, I need to quickly raise money and then build this product, reach to the next stage, and then raise more capital for different purpose. So every fundraise should be linked to a goal. You should have internal milestones that, hey, I am raising $1 million at this time because I want to achieve these XYZ things. This is my internal milestone. Your goal is not to raise money. Raising money is just a way to build your product.
That's true. That's true. This actually brings me to my next point. And I would like to get your feedback on that as well. How do you think this whole culture of one is, of course, investors push for it, but do you think at some point of time it becomes ingrained in the mind of a founder as well that even if I'm not able to find the right price point, should I just go ahead and sell anything at any point? Because I have spoken to multiple founders and asked them, hey, why did you keep a commission of 4%? Or why did you keep a take rate of 12%? Or why did you price your SaaS as $100 a month or $1,200 a year? I particularly do not get that answer very clearly. Why do you think that happened?
To go back to your point, I
Yeah.
honestly sympathize with the founders because as a first time founder, it's extremely difficult to find out the right price. Like you are in the market, like let's say you try to sell something for $10, you realize it's not selling for $10, or maybe it's not selling the way you want it. So you always tweaking the price. And any new product, be it software, be it a marketplace, be it a consumer product, consumer internet, it's extremely difficult to get the price right in the first go. You have to iterate, you have to keep changing prices to realize that, hey, at this price, this is my gross margin, these are my net margins, and this is my customer retention. This is how much I am investing on acquiring customer. This is what the repeat purchase is. So there are several metrics which a founder who doesn't understand finance well misses out. But I think also the key flaw lies in the area that founders scale too quickly before figuring out the right price. Now, there's a lot of wisdom in saying finding your product market fit. You should not just go all out before you figure out that, hey, at this market, this is the right price, which balances all my KPIs, which balances all my metrics. Unfortunately, most founders, especially first time founders, and especially those who have raised a lot of capital, don't pay attention to it. Hence, in my opinion, raising too much capital too early could also kill you, like, could also be fatal for you.
That is a very big challenge. Now, just taking your cue from the point of not knowing what to do with the funds and how to bring that financial control in, I also wanted to highlight a US startup. I actually interviewed with these guys a couple of years back. They were based out of San Francisco. It's basically called Synapse Financial Technologies. It was a middleware platform where fintech companies would connect with traditional banks to offer services like accounts, loans, and payment processing. You know the works. But the problem is they lost close to $85 million of customers' money into thin air. And it all happened because they could not manage the take rate that they were taking as a commission on loaning the money and the amount that they were interest that they were taking the money off from banks. The mistakes were very basic. I mean, they were using Excel sheets to manage $30 million worth of inventory that was sitting in their FBO account, which is basically a middleware account where the money from the bank comes in and these guys pull in to give to the customers. They were managing that on Excel sheets, no systems, no whatsoever. And yeah, of course, the system breaks. And then, of course, then whenever audits happened, it was a major scandal. This actually brings me to a lot of highlight that I want to bring to this topic, where financial mismanagement is one part of it, but it doesn't start with something that can be tagged as financial mismanagement. It starts as something that has to be validated at the business model itself. Yeah. Any last comments from you, son, on this?
Um, I mean, we've spoken a lot of cases, and in terms of the unit economy, with the last mile delivery company, I think there are also other ways. For instance, like Coupang, it's like a fast delivery unicorn in Korea, and there are also a competitor called Market Curly in Korea. But Coupang is making money and they're profit, and Market Curly is um, negative. And the reason why is because Coupang has IPO'd and they have a lot of money, first of all. And with that money, they made unit economy. But so they made unit economy in their way by making their delivery system more efficient. So automating it as much as possible. And also they use the membership. So basically their normal model as an e-commerce, right? You just buy one and you get the transaction fee. right? Like normal e-commerce companies. That's normal what commerce business gain the money, but actually they've been smart getting the membership fee installment, right? So they get the fee of a membership fee, so they can be part of like quick delivery service. So founders can be startups can be creative, making the whole business unit economy to make it better, not just their the transaction business, because in transaction business it's very transparent with the business. It's whether it's few percentage up or down, so you cannot change a lot of things there, but you have to be more creative because it's a startup, right? So you have to be creative with the business model as well. So I think that's the case with Coupang.